Again, I'm a landscape architect. I'm with a firm out of the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis area. And we're a small outfit. There's 40 of us, and we're most similar to a civil engineering firm, but we're water-centric, and therefore that's how we've landed in the low-impact development arena. I've been practicing for about 15, 16 years, and for me, and likely for all of you, low-impact development is a profession, but it's certainly a passion as well. I'm going to tell you a story about the Amery Regional Medical Center, and the story I'm going to tell is not so much about the design of it, but more the outcome. It is 7 years mature now, and we went through a post-occupancy evaluation for this facility, and I think that yielded some interesting insights in terms of how the community and the staff have embraced the facility or lack thereof. Give you a little bit of context. Here's the Twin Cities metropolitan area. This is Wisconsin on this side. Amery is a really small town. It's 3,000, 4,000 people, something like that. And it is probably about an hour from a large metropolitan area. Twin Cities are probably 4 million, 5 million people, something like that. And what I did want to express here, though, is that this hour difference, which doesn't seem like much, might as well be an eternity away, because an hour of separation, this is rural, and even if we have low-impact development precedents an hour away, they totally disregard those and consider, that's what you guys do in, the concrete jungle. A little bit more context of where this is. I was joking with Kurt, who's also from Minneapolis earlier, and this is a surprise to him as well, but this is this morning's forecast, and this project's it's April 2nd today, and they're talking 12 inches, 14 inches of snow in this area. So certainly a cold climate perspective, but there's lessons to be learned also for Oklahoma and the Great Plains. Not quite sure if we'll get back home tomorrow, Kurt, though.
Is this the late April Fool's joke you're playing?
No, it is not. People ask me, why did the hospital do this? I don't really have a great answer. Thankfully, the CEO of the hospital had it in his mind that he was going to do something green. He didn't know what that meant. He didn't know about low-impact development. Interestingly, he was probably one of the few people that embraced this. Everyone else rejected it, but he was at the top, and so his way ruled. The hospital property, though, the backdrop was a river. This happens to be Apple River, and it's a beautiful setting, and there was a connection made for that CEO of the hospital. He also happened to be the mayor of this town, and he wanted to protect this, and more importantly, he wanted to embrace it in the design, not turn your back to this opportunity, but celebrate it. A couple tidbits about the sites from a design standpoint. Obviously, from a low-impact development standpoint, you need to understand what's going on with the soils. Very interesting superficial geology here. On the eastern end of the site, we had really thick clay with a given potential infiltration rate. And then on the west side, we had some of the best sands I have ever worked in. And this was literally in 1,000 feet west to east. And so I guess the take home there is, certainly you've got to conduct borings, you've got to find out what your soils are like. But more importantly, you have to, look at the site thoroughly, because had we just done soil borings on the western half of the site and then assumed everything for the east, we would have had massive failures for sure. This was the resulting product, conceptual graphic for you. I'll just kind of paint the picture a little bit about what's in play here. The hospital does have a green roof. It's about an acre of green roof, so a sizable green roof. There was about 2 total acres of what I would call bioretention, rain gardens. That was a mix of those with under drain and those without. There was a little bit of porous pavement in terms of some of the grass pave installations out there for fire lanes. One of the things that you don't see here, and it wasn't really our intention, but there is no stormwater ponding. We were able to achieve all the stormwater management with the bioretention facilities. And to give you another little perspective on how this site drains, there's 3 connection points to the outer periphery. The northern half goes directly to the river, and then these 2 portions of the site drain to this street, which in turn drains to the Apple River. Something like 600 feet of pipe on this project. We had run other scenarios previously before they went this LID route, and certainly we probably cut that pipe and that gray infrastructure cost by a fraction. I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the things that I wanted to show you about was, you can have a good plan in place and it can go to hell in a hurry from a construction standpoint. And one of the things that we've almost even gone to now is literally fencing off these key bioretention areas. So what you've got in place here is a partially constructed parking lot. You can kind of visualize the bioretention facility in the middle here. And this site was like this condition for 1.5 years while they were building the hospital. We use these as pre-settlement basins, and then just before construction, we would go and excavate 12 inches, 18 inches of this material out, which contained, the sediment that it captured during that period of time, and then we would construct these. But literally, if we hadn't fenced this off, we would have seen equipment parked here, concrete washed and stored here, and it seems a little bit ridiculous to fence these things off for this purpose, but if we don't do this, we have experience that we're compromising, many of our facilities. Beyond the hydrology, before I get to the post-occupancy, I want to talk a little bit about, the stacked function of low-impact development. And really, it's these things that the public sees and embrace. They don't understand what's going on in a bioretention facility in terms of its hydrology. But a couple of the stacked functions here is we did have a healing garden of sorts that overlooked that river that I was telling you about. And this is probably one of the most successful pieces of the project. I've seen many people, celebrating a birth here or grieving, a loss. And all of this is incorporated into this broader campus. And then the hospital did some interesting things too, like they had an osprey that was messing with a nearby utility power complex, and we put this up, this raptor pole here. And the other interesting thing they did is then capitalizing that on again. The raptor relocated here. They ran a feed up to this pole, and now that feed comes into the room of the patient rooms, and they can turn it to channel 6 and watch that. So a lot of synergy and connectivity certainly on this project. I also wanted to mention they came full circle and really drank the Kool-Aid on this project. There was a competition after the hospital was built to name the cafe. I had nothing to do with this, and frankly, I didn't even know about this until I showed up there one day for lunch, and this is what they call their cafe. So that was the context. Certainly, I skipped over a little bit, but now let me tell you about the post-occupancy. So 7 years post-construction. We did a survey. Portion of that was an online, SurveyMonkey. And then we also did interviews. We did some stormwater monitoring for all of 2013. I'll tell you about that and its comparisons to our modeled scenarios, and then also just our general site assessment. So again, we sent out a survey to the hospital, and the hospital wasn't really interested in this. It was us that was interested in this, and so we paid for this on our own dime. The hospital really appreciates that we did this and provided the information to them. But what I was really blown away by is that there was maybe like 90% participation in this survey. So you can see the survey respondents here populated by who they are. You've got healthcare staff, doctors, nurses, administrative staff, maintenance staff, and then other, which the other category was city council people, council, aldermen, that kind of thing. And this is a small hospital. There was probably 100 staff there total, and so we captured a large portion of that staff. And I was, when you've done these surveys before, you're happy if you get like 20%, participation. So they're passionate about it, good and bad. Usually, people that are mad or happy participate in these things. We asked them a whole host of questions to find out who they were, so we get some perspective of, well, if they respond this way, what's their connection to the site, and what's that going to tell us? We did the whole, strongly agree, strongly disagree thing. And then, as I said, we asked them to identify themselves. And then we also provided an open response. So tell us just your general thoughts about the project. And man, people flooded that with input. I won't go through all the questions, but I'll touch on a few of them to give you some perspective of the return of this survey. One of the things that I wanted to know about was, how familiar are they with the intentions of the site design? So, we had some language in there of, do you know what the purpose of the green roof is? Do you know that there is a green roof? And the results came back that the group was well informed. So I'll give you a few more graphs like this on the following slides. I said that there was strongly agree, strongly disagree, and if you understand that, then this answer right here is kind of a neutral, I don't know sort of scenario. So people were very informed, and they readily understood about the green roofs. The patient rooms look right out onto these green roofs, and so, there's a connection. It's not, I should tell you that it's a two-story building, and the green roof is always on the first story, and then those two-story patient rooms looked out on that green roof. But the group was very familiar with the rain gardens and the green roof, and they didn't even really know about the porous pavements and those kinds of things. And so I'm telling you that now to give you some perspective of, that sort of disconnect with the user. We also asked them, do you feel that this design, this outcome has value? And the way we attributed value here was, we asked them, do you believe that it protects the river? And do you believe that it provides habitat? And we didn't say what kind of habitat, we just generically said habitat. And again, pretty favorable response. They for the most part, everyone believed that. So a positive response. Right away from question 2, we could start to see a trend. If somebody believed this, then we could kind of predict the way they were going to respond the rest of the survey. So if they believed it had value here, I was going to see positive results the rest of the way. If we started to lose them there, we're going to lose them, the further we got into this survey. And one of the other interesting things that we picked up a lot in the survey where they could just add their own opinion was, surprisingly, many people said, well, I hope that it's providing value in terms of habitat and stormwater. And almost like they were thirsting for somebody to say that it is, because they've been sold a bill of goods, or they've occupied this facility for 7 years, but they want to know what's going on with the stormwater. They want to know, do we have pollinators here? Do we have nesting songbirds? And it wasn't just a matter of aesthetics for them. They wanted the answers behind the scenes. We also asked about aesthetics, and I guess it shouldn't be too surprising, but the aesthetics all boil down to landscape or vegetation. And favorable results, so yes, in general, the survey group really appreciated this and thought it was a great aesthetic. But these results were really skewed because we had a number of people that just hated it. Comments like, I can't believe that you've got all these thistles and weeds out here. This is just, this is the worst. We should all just mow all this down and start over. And of course, what you've got going on there is some people, it's not their thing. They're separated from low impact development. They're separated from, the wave of native landscaping. And, we lost them. We never captured them. But interestingly, that was never my direct client, right? We're building a hospital for a bunch of administrative brass and trying to work hard to convince them that this is the right thing to do. But the message has never been trickled down to the other staff. And we're never going to convince everybody that this is a great aesthetic, right? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But we did have a lot of people that just outright dislike this. And I should also tell you that it is a more wild landscape palette. The hospital intentionally wanted that. And so, if they weren't into that, we lost them. We also lost people as the site matured, and I guess I've seen that as well. You can imagine those first couple years where all those plantings are confined and you see each and every species and you don't have things touching each other. As the site matured and became, in my opinion, much more robust and healthy and afforded those habitat, some people drew back and went, this is getting out of control, we gotta do something about this. The other thing I'll tell you is there were some major issues with the green roof, and I'll tell you what those are down the road. And these results are really skewed by a lot of knocks on the green roof as well. So it was kind of hard to separate out of people's opinions about aesthetics because people had very strong disapprovals of the green roof on this project. We talked about maintenance, and I got this picture here, which is not the maintenance guy on set because he's happy. And I've got two questions here paired together. We asked them that age-old question of, do you believe that native landscaping, so this isn't LID, but this is more landscaping, do you believe that native landscaping requires less maintenance than traditional sod and turf? These are the kinds of things that we preach, and we point to research that says that that's the case, and they probably have heard some of that as well. And so we just asked them in general, do you believe this? And then we followed up immediately after with, do you believe that that's occurring at this site? And some mixed thoughts about that. Yeah, you can see that in general, people believed it. The maintenance was more than I expected. How long is it going to take us to get over this establishment period that you've been telling me about? And again, these results are skewed because the green roof, because of some green roof issues that I'll get into. One of the things to pay attention to here when we start to look at the identifiers is, look where the maintenance staff is relative to where, the administrative staff is. The administrative staff, those are the people that I was working for. They had drinking the Kool-Aid long ago. They're not the ones out there pulling the weeds and doing the work. But I think it's very interesting, because I see this trend again and again. This is their job. These aren't maintenance-free landscapes, right? No one ever said that. But if you're the person that's bending over to pull a weed or doing something, you feel like you don't like that. It's not a joy or something necessarily. So the maintenance staff was a little hard on things there, and it's an interesting perspective. But you can also see tier 2 that in terms of native plants being less maintenance, they believed it more so in general, but less so for their site. I'll jump into some hydrology. I don't have a lot here for you in terms of the hydrology performance, but I guess the take home is that we did do some obviously pre-project modeling for permitting purposes and for design purposes. And then we also monitored it for all of 2013. And the interesting thing is that the monitoring in terms of 2013 is looking like the system is working. It's even performing a little bit better than we had modeled. We have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt because it's just 1 year of continuous monitoring. We did receive a 2-year event in 2013, but we never received an event any larger than that. And so that's why I didn't even bother really extrapolating this to 10 and 100 years. And really this design isn't for 100 years anyways. We're more in this arena for water quality and function. One of the things that was different between modeled and monitored was the green roof was not part of the initial design. It was kind of one of those things that they thought that they would add it in later, but they added it in right away. So we were probably performing better because of that wasn't in the model. The other swing to that though is they did end up putting irrigation in the sod that is out there, and we had wholly planned that wasn't going to be a part of it. So maybe it's a little bit of a balance. Interestingly, I had showed you earlier about those couple discharge points, and I also told you that all the clay is on the east side of the site. All this water that's, thank you, all this water that's left, all of that came from the east side and where we had under drains. And to date, they haven't had any water discharge in 7 years on the west side. So we certainly, moved as much of the water to those sands as we could. We probably should have moved even more if we could have, but all in all, functioning well. Lessons learned. I think part of the reason why we had a problem with maintenance is, I think we get into trouble of kind of overselling these things. By no means did I say this was maintenance free and this was going to be the world's greatest thing, but they hear that and people catch on to it, and so I think that their expectations were that there was going to be less maintenance. The other interesting thing too that I've learned over the years is that a burning prairie and somebody weeding a green roof is much more apparent than somebody mowing a landscape. Right? Because you see people mowing all the time, you never think about it. But if you're a hospital worker and go, man, they've been on that green roof all week mowing weeds. So this is these trays, that you slide in place versus a green roof that's put down with layers and is contiguous. One of the things that I personally don't like about it is it has a lot of edge. And if you have all that edge, you certainly have a lot of fluctuations in both temperature and moisture. And then you're also reducing your benefits in terms of, thermal and water retention. And then to compound the problem, the way it was done was there was a considerable amount of periphery with more edge. Hospitals, you talk about roof penetrations, every room in there had, half a dozen different penetrations, and so this green roof was highly penetrated. And then, they went with the thinnest available option in terms of the thickness. And the reality is it looks great now. It took 7 years to get it great, and there were a few years where it really struggled and was brown, and they put a lot of effort into getting this off the ground. So this is my last slide, and I guess the take home is it's interesting that, not just our clients, but the people that use the space want to know about the results, that things are working, what their intention is, what the function is, and you can put all the, interpretive education signage you want out there, but until you relay that message in some fashion, they're not going to understand it or believe it. But there's not always a good mechanism to deliver that message. So after we went through the trouble of doing this, the hospital brought us back in, and again, I gave a presentation over lunch, and again, 90 people, listened to this over their lunch hour, and the reality is once they know that it's working, or maybe even better understand it, their approval rating goes up rather dramatically. And so now you can overcome aesthetics that maybe aren't quite their thing. And then I guess my biggest success was, I told you that the CEO was guiding this whole thing, but he dedicated the whole project to Bob in the brown shirt there. And Bob hated this. He was my arch nemesis, the whole time. He was my direct point of contact, and he just poo-pooed all of this. And but he is now the biggest advocate for all of this, and has come full circle and said I was so wrong. How I've learned so much, and so we all have roadblocks, but now literally this guy in western Wisconsin is the biggest champion, inviting people to his site and having conferences at the hospital, and so certainly a success story from that point. So a few of the other people that were involved in the project, along with myself. And I want to thank you just for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure to be in Tulsa.
We have time for a couple quick questions. Anybody?
In back.
Was it anything specific that gentleman who was your arch nemesis, that it's like a turnaround point, or was it just over the whole period of time that he kind of gradually came on board?
No, he came on board that first fall, where after the plant material was established, and it was literally on fire with color, and there were bees and pollinators over. He was a blue collar guy. This was really foreign to him. A lot of new things he rejected early on, and the other thing that he sees is that his staff, and his colleagues are recreating, using this, walking on site. And so it wasn't a one day overnight kind of thing, but a turnaround over a couple years for him. Yeah.
You mentioned the roof penetration, you're talking about the construction then of something penetrating the membrane or whatever those cells were for the green roof, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, there were modular systems, so they weren't, contiguous to begin with. But then we had, venting penetrations. Interesting thing with green roofs, it works out very well with this healing property where you look out on green roofs, right? It's one of the selling points. And patients, there's been studies to show that patients recover better when they have that aesthetic to look at versus a white roof. The other thing that green roofs are sold on was, thermal insulating benefit. But I learned after the fact that that's not a benefit from hospitals because of air exchange. And the requirement that they have from an air exchange, that insulation benefit negated that. And so we didn't really get the thermal benefit out of this green roof. But there were, all these penetrations for that air exchange.